I knew the fire was coming the day Brad forgot to invite me to the risk mitigation meeting I created. Picture this, it's 9:03 a.m., Monday. I'm sipping lukewarm coffee out of a chipped compliance conference mug that says rules are sexy, because irony is my love language. Calendars blocked out for our monthly governance review, the one I've run for 6 straight years without fail. I open the Zoom link. Nothing. I check Slack. Crickets. Then a former intern-turned-exec pings me. Hey, did Brad mean to leave you off the invite? Cue the theme song to every workplace horror story, probably. Now, before we jump into the flames, let me set the room. I was the director of compliance strategy, officially. Unofficially, I was the person who made sure the SEC didn't knock down our glass doors with a battering ram and a subpoena. I didn't lead product launches or sit in on branding workshops where we ideated how to sell financial vapor as innovation. I tracked access logs. I flagged exceptions. I logged authorization flows like my life depended on it, because in this place it kinda did. No, it wasn't glamorous. No fancy swag bags or VIP keynotes with champagne. But I had the trust of the CEO, the board, and even the dev team, which is saying something considering they once wrote an internal API named after me as a joke. Slash, this is bad Karen will know. Oh, and by the way, quick pause for a real talk moment. If you're listening to this and you're not subscribed yet, hit that little button, will ya? 90% of folks just lurk here like it's corporate espionage and don't subscribe or like, and I gotta tell you, it messes with the team's morale worse than a Friday layoff memo. You tap, we cheer. Pinky swear. Anyway, back to the show. See, I kept everything, not out of paranoia, but out of necessity. We were a fintech hybrid, part digital bank, part investment sandbox for VC toddlers who thought crypto was a personality. Our CEO, Robert, understood what tightrope we walked. Every quarter, we danced right up to the edge of federal wire without falling off. Not because of luck, because I was there, silently holding the damn rope. There were systems we weren't supposed to override. Exceptions that required 2 signatures but got fast-tracked with winks. Internal policies were written in Slack and then quietly versioned out of existence. I cataloged them all, not to snitch, but because when the day came, and I knew it would, I needed to be able to prove I hadn't been asleep at the wheel. And then came Brad, the heir, the legacy curse in a Patagonia vest, fresh out of Stanford MBA boot camp and reeking of disruptive energy drinks and daddy's Rolodex. His first words to me in our introductory one-on-one were, "So what exactly do you do?" I smiled and said, "I keep us from being indicted." He didn't laugh. 2 weeks after Robert went out on emergency medical leave, triple bypass, stress-induced, shocker, Brad was named acting COO. Within days, I noticed things starting to slip. Governance sessions canceled. Vendor reviews deprioritized. He posted a photo on LinkedIn captioned, "Compliance should enable, not restrain." Cool, except the last guy who said that ended up testifying in front of Congress. At first, I played it cool. I'd been through reorgs, CEOs, pivots, and budget freezes. You learn to ride the waves. But then I saw what he was doing, removing safeguards, pushing out the quiet dissenters, and targeting, with laser focus, anyone his father ever praised, which made me a neon bullseye. But even then, I wasn't scared, because I knew where all the wires ran. I didn't just build the circuit, I monitored the current. Every exception logged, every policy flag saved with metadata, every server path where something temporarily lived until someone could bury it. Some people keep journals. I kept an archive of sins. That was my comfort zone. A world where the louder voices sold dreams, and I quietly swept the minefield they built those dreams on. A world where I was invisible, until I wasn't. Robert's bypass surgery came in the middle of Q3 projections, sandwiched between a vendor breach scare and a board audit prep. 1 minute, he was on a call with legal muttering about how the SEC was circling again, and the next he was in a hospital bed with a stent the size of my patient's threaded through his chest. That same afternoon, an all-staff email went out. Subject: Leadership update effective immediately. Bradley Winslow will assume the role of acting COO during Robert Winslow's medical leave. We appreciate your continued focus during this time of transition. Translation: The frat boy now had keys to the castle, and within 48 hours, he used those keys like a crowbar. First thing he did, canceled the tri-weekly governance huddles. Just nixed them. I found out from an auto-declined invite. This event has been removed by the organizer. Brad's calendar note read, "Streamlining for speed. Cute." Next up, he canned the compliance sync with finance. I pinged him diplomatically, reminding him that Q4 reconciliation required coordinated policy sign-offs. He replied with 3 words, "Too much red tape." Red tape. That's what he called it. Net I kept under this flying circus so it wouldn't smash into a federal wall was now decorative ribbon. But the worst wasn't the changes, it was the smirks. The little side comments in leadership Slack channels. Stuff like, "We're moving fast now. Compliance is great, but let's not be scared of progress. Gotta shed that bureaucratic bloat." Bureaucratic bloat. That one stuck. I saw it on a whiteboard once during one of Brad's closed-door strategy refreshes. It had arrows pointing from old guard, which I assumed was me, to lean ops, which included his fraternity brother he just made head of biz dev. The ground didn't shake all at once. It shifted quietly underfoot. One day I couldn't access a staging dashboard I helped build. The next, I was removed from a compliance chain on a legal review. I brought it up once. Just once. I cornered him after a team debrief and said, "Brad, I'm noticing I've been left off a few critical threads." He laughed like I'd told a dad joke, then said, "Karen, you're doing great. But let's be honest, my dad gave you a big title. I need people who move, not people who manage." That sentence. It stuck in my ribs like glass. My entire job was to manage risk, exposure, liability. Managing was the only reason this place hadn't been on CNBC's Whistleblower Wednesday yet. I didn't respond, just walked away and added it to the mental folder labeled, "Things that will age like milk." A few days later, he announced an all-hands Compliance Initiative 2.0, a fancy name for gutting every protective mechanism I'd spent years building. The presentation? A slide deck with fire emojis, a stock photo of a race car, and a bulleted list of obsolete roles we're reviewing for streamlining. My title was the second one down, right under Policy Oversight Analyst. No names, just roles like we were inventory. I half expected him to slap a discount sticker on me, now 50% less useful. People started avoiding me, not maliciously, but the way you avoid someone who might be next. Coworkers who used to share memes or ask for help started forwarding emails instead of chatting. I was radioactive, and the Geiger counter was clicking faster every hour. Still, stayed calm. I'd seen this game before. Usually ends with the golden boy getting bored, screwing something up, and the adults coming back in to clean up his mess. But something felt different this time. This wasn't just corporate growing pains, this was extraction. He was hollowing out the safety net on purpose. I started working late again, not because I needed to, but because I wanted time alone on the system. Quiet hours when no one was watching. I began tagging things, creating hashes of documents, downloading logs to an encrypted external drive I kept in my bag like a fire extinguisher. I wasn't paranoid. I was preparing for impact. Because when a man with a trust fund and a vendetta starts swinging at infrastructure, it's not if the building falls, it's when. The termination meeting wasn't on my calendar. Of course it wasn't. Brad waited until the executive sync. An agendaless free-for-all he turned into a weekly flex session to pull the trigger. He did it with a protein shake in one hand and a smugness you couldn't bottle without violating at least 3 OSHA guidelines. "Before we wrap," he said, tossing his laptop closed like he was ending a TED talk nobody asked for, "I've got one final update. Karen here, our Director of Compliance Strategy, will be transitioning out, effective immediately." Silence, and a single snort of confusion from Joanne in legal. Brad grinned wider, eyes flicking to each person like he was expecting applause. Let's be honest, her role doesn't exist anymore. We're not in 2012. We're not begging regulators for mercy. We're building velocity, not asking for permission. Compliance should inform, not dictate, right? He looked directly at me, that sales pitch gleaming hard. "You had a cute little title," he added. "You're just a vestige of my father's era." That word, vestige, hit like ice water down the spine. Not because it was cruel, because it was accurate in the way that cowards tell the truth when they think it makes them powerful. I didn't flinch, not visibly. No dramatic gasps, no "how dare you" monologue, just a breath. One deep, steady inhale. I folded my notebook, closed my pen, stood, nodded. "I see," I said, nothing more. I walked out to the sound of chair wheels shifting awkwardly on the cheap carpet. No one followed. No one spoke, and I didn't expect them to. That's the thing about being the firewall, they only notice you when the building's already on fire. Back at my desk, I packed nothing. Not my plants, not my mug, not the half-worn mouse pad with the faded SEC logo from a 2016 summit. I left it all, like a ghost vacating a haunted house. What I did take was my drive, the one labeled innocuously as Q3 vendor audits, but encrypted 6 layers deep. I'd been curating it quietly for years, not to be vindictive, but because I never trusted a system that treated truth like it had a quarterly budget. Inside, it lived everything. Access logs from the customer data override console Brad's team swore didn't exist. A trail of exception approvals rubber-stamped through Slack emojis. Authorization flows rerouted without sign-off during a crypto transaction window the SEC flagged once, and we fixed, temporarily. And a PDF with 72 pages of policy changes that had never gone through legal, just quietly merged into production and retrofitted with plausible timestamps. It was all tagged, cross-referenced, and time-locked. That night, I sat on my patio with a lukewarm can of ginger ale and logged into the SEC whistleblower portal like I was submitting a grant application. I didn't rush it. I uploaded everything in curated waves, packets named things like discrepancy batch alpha, auth tree deviation, public vs private statements, risk delta. Cold, clean, legally literate. I attached no explanation. The files spoke for themselves. The dates were damning. Overlaps impossible to explain away as coincidence. The final packet I named Legacy. It was the one that traced a single data permission backdoor, granted manually, without protocol, back to Brad. His digital fingerprints were all over it. He used it once to access customer financials tagged in a compliance investigation that was quietly buried. I didn't add a note, didn't write a vengeance manifesto or a confessional. I wasn't a martyr, I was a mirror. I clicked submit. The confirmation page popped up like a prayer answered in Arial font. Your materials have been received. Thank you for your submission. Preliminary review in progress. I closed the laptop, left it on the patio table. Then I poured myself a glass of tap water and stood in the dark kitchen, looking at nothing, listening to the quiet hum of the fridge. I felt nothing. No fury, no grief, no satisfaction yet. Just the dull stillness of someone who had been erased from the page, but kept the original draft. The SEC confirmation sat in my inbox like a sealed envelope you don't open twice. Just a sterile message with a case number and an assurance that preliminary review is underway. No signature, no names, no indication of when or if anyone would look past the surface. For the first 3 days, I checked that inbox every 2 hours. On the 4th day, I stopped opening it entirely. Instead, I watched the machine kick into PR overdrive. Brad launched something called Operation Clear Path, a ridiculous name for his compliance streamlining campaign that sounded like a cult retreat or a scented candle line. The company posted a glossy blog entry headlined Efficiency over Obstruction, a new era of governance. It had quotes from Brad about unlocking agility and letting our builders build. There was a photo of him in the old war room, my war room, standing in front of a dry erase board with the words "friction kills momentum" circled in red marker like it was scripture. My name was nowhere, of course. The systems I built were rebranded as legacy overhead. The same protocols that kept us from triggering fines were now positioned as red tape intentionally designed to stifle innovation. I read the article 3 times. My jaw didn't clench. My hands didn't shake. But something under the surface did, a slow, rising tension like a storm assembling just offshore. Then came the interviews. TechCrunch, Fast Company. 2 influencers on LinkedIn reposted a photo of Brad fist-bumping a VC with the caption, "Finally, a fintech COO who's not afraid to move fast and break compliance." They thought it was clever. I read it 3 times and stared at the phrase "break compliance." I started keeping a new file. Just screenshots, links, copies of statements. Comments from investors praising the risk-positive approach. I wasn't compiling it for the SEC. I was compiling it for me. Because if this thing got buried, if the truth dissolved in the PR fog, I wanted proof that I wasn't insane, that I didn't imagine it all. The acquisition rumors hit next. An industry whisper first. Then a tweet from someone at Cinder Capital, followed by an anonymous tip in a fintech Slack I still lurked in. Apparently, a large European firm was sniffing around. Something about synergy and scaling and a fresh compliance direction. The word exit floated through the air like perfume, enticing, sweet, but just toxic enough to sting the lungs. That's when the dread really set in, not because I feared being forgotten. I'd already accepted that. What scared me was the timeline. If the acquisition went through fast enough, could rewrite the whole story. The sins I documented might become footnotes or worse, disappear entirely in a restructuring haze. I kept imagining Brad popping champagne on a balcony somewhere, bragging to reporters about his radical compliance overhaul while my archive sat unopened in a government queue. I spent most of that week pacing. Not panicked, just aware. Alert. My world had shrunk to a living room, a file tree, and a distant countdown I couldn't hear but felt like a pulse in the back of my throat. Every day I walked 3 miles to nowhere, came home, made pasta I didn't eat, and refreshed my submission portal like it was a newsfeed. Nothing, until Tuesday. A new email, not from the automated system. This one had a name. Subject, clarification, requested authorization logs short. Clinical, but real. It wanted elaboration on the routing structure I'd labeled Alt Path 7A, the one tied to the customer account deletions from last summer. The language was neutral, but the request was specific. Someone read the files, not skimmed, not archived, read. I reread the email 5 times before exhaling. I responded with a breakdown, attached the full decision tree chart, added a plain English explanation of how the flag system had been circumvented. I triple-checked it for tone, no editorializing, just facts. Code meets motive meets signature, then silence again, but a different kind of silence this time, not void, coiled. I turned on the TV later that night and caught a panel on compliance in hyper-growth startups. A guy in a vest was saying something idiotic about how most regulations are just speed bumps for winners. The audience laughed. I muted it, then smiled to myself, because Brad had no idea that his speed bump had been logging every impact, and the cracks were already starting to show. The follow-up email was short, almost offensively so. Are you available for clarification on logs related to internal authorization paths? No good afternoon, no closing, no fluff. Just the raw nerve of inquiry, and I loved it. The phrase internal authorization paths was specific, too specific to be random. Meant someone was digging into the right tunnel, the bypass protocols used to reroute approval chains when Brad's team wanted something done faster than policy allowed. Those logs didn't just show actions, they showed intent. And intent is what transforms negligence into something criminal. I sat down at my desk, cracked my knuckles, and drafted the most sterile, bulletproof response of my career. Precise, legalese-laden but accessible. No metaphors, no snark, just clean scaffolding for what I knew they'd find once they traced the flow, originated from Brad's exec account. Timestamped during blackout windows. Skipped two-factor approval layers via revoked user tokens. No oversight, no paper trail except mine. I attached visual annotations, system flow diagrams, and appended two decrypted entries from the security API cache. I knew what I was handing them. It wasn't evidence, it was ammunition. I hit send. And then I waited, again. But this time, the silence felt different, like the eye of a storm instead of a vacuum. I walked around the block 3 times, circling past the same droopy Halloween decorations on my neighbor's porch, paper ghosts sagging in the late October rain. Back home, I opened Slack out of habit and saw I still had read-only access to one legacy channel, #team updates. Nobody had bothered to revoke it. Sloppy. In it, someone had posted a selfie with Brad in the background, holding court at a cafe with a local tech reporter. The caption read, "Big push coming, Brad says we're audit-proof now." Audit-proof. I nearly dropped my tea. The sheer idiocy of saying that out loud on the record during an active SEC submission window, that wasn't boldness. That was terminal hubris. The kind of thing you say right before the floor caves in. Minutes later, I got a text from Maya, one of the senior analysts who used to sneak Pop-Tarts into our compliance meetings and call me mom. "Hey, you didn't hear this from me, but Brad's meeting with the Cinder folks on Friday. He's hyping a clean compliance bill, said the system's bulletproof. They're planning to go public with it next week." I stared at the message for a full 60 seconds, then I smiled. There it was, the moment. When the pressure peaks, when arrogance overtakes caution, and the person holding the gasoline decides to light a match just to prove they're not scared. They don't know the room is already filled with fumes. They never do. I made myself a sandwich I didn't finish. Left it on the counter while I opened my local archive again, not to add anything, but to double-check the timestamps on 3 critical log entries, the last override Brad issued, the final policy document altered post-approval, the Slack message where he typed, "Just push it live, we'll figure out compliance later." Each one aligned. Each one was already in the packet. I didn't need to lift a finger. The noose was tied. He just had to walk into it. I refreshed the submission portal again. Still no update. But I didn't mind the waiting now, because I could feel the momentum shifting, not all at once. Just the way a room changes temperature when someone walks in with news they shouldn't have. Later that night, I got a voicemail from a blocked number. No message, just static. Might have been nothing, or it might have been the wind changing. Either way, I slept for the first time in weeks. Because when a man screams audit proof into a reporter's iPhone during an active investigation, all you have to do is let the camera roll. 3 weeks, 21 days of silence from the portal. No follow-ups, no calls, not even a login confirmation. My last message, containing the most damning digital paper trail I'd ever assembled, just vanished into the gray wool of government intake. No smoke, no signal, nothing. The first few days I checked obsessively. Hit refresh like a lab rat hitting the sugar lever. By week 2, I checked it once in the morning and once at night like brushing my teeth. Ritual, not hope. By week 3, I stopped checking at all. That kind of quiet doesn't just hum, it weighs. I found myself avoiding eye contact with my laptop, letting unread tabs pile up like moldy dishes. My confidence, which had been firm and cool and razor-sharp for months, started softening at the edges. Maybe they flagged it as personal revenge. Maybe they assumed I was disgruntled. Maybe they were overworked and underpaid and just didn't care. Maybe I was naive to think truth mattered more than press cycles. That Friday, I walked past my old office building out of sheer masochism. They'd taken down the etched glass plaque with the company's old mission statement, integrity through innovation, and replaced it with something that looked like a cryptocurrency logo and a tagline that just said, "Build fast," in all caps. The lights were on. People were still working. Brad was probably inside, selling his clean bill of compliance to anyone with a checkbook and a LinkedIn premium badge. The next morning, I got cornered by my neighbor, Diane, while dragging my recycling bin to the curb. She's the type who reads neighborhood Facebook groups like their scripture and knows exactly when your trash can goes out. "Hey Han," she said, tilting her head with the weight of unwanted sympathy. "Just wanted to say, if you ever want to talk or need help with job stuff." I blinked at her, smile set like wax. "Oh, I'm fine. Consulting, actually. Keeping busy." She lit up. "Leave to have a box to put me in." "Oh, that's great. You always struck me as one of those smart, organized types." Organized, sure. My entire life was now sorted into labeled folders, violation logs, backdoor auth paths, and reasons I don't sleep. I went back inside and opened my fridge. Stared at the same 3 items I'd been rotating for weeks, leftover quinoa, expired yogurt, and a sad bag of shredded cheese that smelled like regret. I didn't eat. I didn't sit. I just stood there, letting the blue light hum against my face. Around midnight, my phone buzzed. Not a message, not a call, just a calendar alert. Something I'd forgotten to delete. Board review risk exposure briefing Monday 10 o'clock a.m. location, exec conf. Room 1A, I hadn't seen that room in over a month. But that meeting, that was mine. I built the review template. I constructed the framework. Every quarter, I'd compile a brutally honest heat map of where we were weak, where we were exposed, and which departments were skating too close to a fine or worse. For 6 years, it had been my stage. Now, someone else would be standing there. Probably some new hire with a PowerPoint full of rainbows and risk mitigation buzzwords. Or maybe no one at all. Maybe Brad killed the review entirely and left the board staring at silence. I just sat there, staring at the reminder like it was a ghost. It didn't sting, it ached. Not because I missed the job, but because it felt like a window into a world that kept spinning without me. Even as I tried to warn it, there was a brick wall coming fast. Did I go too quietly? Was I so composed, so professional, so by the book that they never even felt the tremor? I thought back to the files I sent, the logs, the paths, the evidence. It was enough to cripple them. Why did it feel like I'd whispered into a canyon? I powered off the phone, and I let the silence settle like dust. Heavy, invisible, inescapable. 'Cause sometimes the hardest part of lighting the fuse is waiting to see if the fire ever catches. Monday morning broke like any other, gray, quiet, stale. I was still in pajamas, still sipping that same bitter off-brand coffee I'd been nursing for weeks, when my phone buzzed at 9:17 a.m. I expected it to be another just checking in, from one of those overly enthusiastic recruiters trying to shove me into contract roles with names like governance ninja or risk evangelist. But it wasn't. It was Maya. No emojis, no greeting. Just 4 words. Did you hear yet? My stomach pinched. I replied, hear what? 30 seconds later, the phone rang. No time for texts now, she whispered before I even said hello. They're here, who? The sec, my breath snagged. She continued, voice low and frantic like she was narrating a hostage video. Unmarked sedan, 3 guys in suits, no warning, just walked in with clipboards and badges, asked for Brad. He's working remote today, of course. HR's locked in the fishbowl. It's been cut off from server access for 30 minutes. Legal's trying to figure out if we can get ahead of this, but it's bad. Like bad, I didn't speak. I couldn't. You didn't, I mean, did you? I finally exhaled, long and slow. Let's just say I've been busy. Maya went silent for a beat. Then, quietly, holy shit. I heard her walk down a hall, the muffled background sounds of panicked executives, the static tension of a building trying not to collapse under its own guilt. A voice in the distance yelled something about quarantine the proxy logs, followed by the unmistakable sound of someone slamming a conference room door. They're auditing the risk exposure brief, she whispered, the one you used to run. They brought a printed version of your last slide deck. In color, I blinked. In color, Karen, they highlighted things. I nearly laughed. I thanked her, hung up, and sat there, blinking at the wall like it had just moved. The apartment was still. No applause, no dramatic music, just the subtle hum of the fridge and the distant bark of someone's dog. But inside me, something cracked open, satisfaction, sharp and gleaming, laced with disbelief. It actually worked. The fuse I lit in silence didn't fizzle, it found the charge. I opened my laptop, logged into the whistleblower portal. Still the same message, preliminary review in progress. But now I knew what that meant. It meant a sedan. It meant clipboards. It meant a very pale Brad watching from whatever hidey hole he'd crawled into, suddenly aware that the world had teeth. My inbox pinged again. A different friend, this one from finance. Brad really think he could hide that backdoor auth system from everyone? They're asking about transaction mirrors from Q2. It's like they already know everything, because they did, because I told them. I stood up, walked to the window, and stared down at the sidewalk like I expected to see the ripple from where the shockwave hit. Of course I didn't, because it wasn't loud. It wasn't flashy. It was surgical, and I was the scalpel. No headlines yet. No press releases. Just a building full of executives pretending they weren't panicking while trying not to sweat through their tailored button-downs. And somewhere inside it, my name, unspoken, was being whispered with either reverence or fear. Either way, I was back in the room, without ever stepping foot inside. Robert Winslow returned to the office like a general stepping into a battlefield he didn't recognize. Pale, thinner than before, suit hanging looser across the shoulders, and walking with the kind of limp that told you he didn't wait for full clearance to come back. The man had barely survived heart surgery, but whatever news reached him over the weekend yanked him out of recovery and straight into the fire. I didn't see him, but Maya did. She sent me a play-by-play via text that Monday afternoon like it was a courtroom drama unfolding live. 1:03 p.m. he's in the building. Walked right past security like a ghost. Didn't speak to anyone. Straight into the glass conference room. No coffee, no coat, eyes like knives. 1:09 p.m. Brad still working from home. No surprise there. Nobody's seen him since the auditors arrived. Half of the exec team's pretending to look busy while legal tries not to cry. 1:17 p.m. Robert just asked IT why the dev floor is dark. They told him server quarantine. He said, excuse me. 1:21 p.m. partner accounts frozen. 2 major vendors demanding answers. Someone mentioned investor calls backed up since 9 a.m. There's a smell of sweat and broken NDAs in the air. Then came the text that made me sit bolt upright on the couch. 1:28 p.m. he asked what the hell happened. Nobody spoke. Then someone, I think it was Joanne, muttered, Brad terminated the compliance lead last month. A pause. A follow-up text. Robert just said it loud, like building shook loud. Who in God's name did you fire? I covered my mouth. Not to hide a laugh, there wasn't one. Just the sheer magnitude of that sentence echoing across every conference table, every email thread, every executive who nodded along with Brad's efficiency plan. That wasn't just a question. That was a reckoning. They didn't fire a paper pusher. They didn't let go of someone managing process. Eliminated the only thing standing between them and federal dismemberment. And it wasn't some abstract audit exposure anymore, it was real, tactile. The walls were closing in and my absence was now screaming louder than my presence ever did. They didn't see the fire when I was there with the extinguisher. Now they were choking on the smoke. My phone buzzed again. 1:35 p.m. He's asked for a full incident timeline. Legal tried to hedge. He snapped, said, start with her termination, build backward. 1:40 p.m. We're pulling logs from her archive. Turns out there was a compliance trail after all, just not the kind we controlled. I could almost hear the dominoes hitting the boardroom table, one after another. Everything they deleted, covered, rewrote, all of it mirrored in my archive. They thought firing me was erasure. It was replication, because I didn't keep records to prove my value. I kept them to prove what they destroyed when I was gone. Outside, the wind picked up. Leaves clattered against my windows like they were trying to watch, too. I didn't text back, didn't gloat, didn't forward the messages to anyone else. I just closed my eyes for a second. Let the silence wrap around me. This time not as an exile, but as witness. Because sometimes the loudest sound in the world is one powerful man realizing exactly who he let his idiot son fire. The call came at 7:41 p.m., just as I was rinsing out the coffee pot that hadn't brewed anything fresh since Thursday. Blocked number, of course. I let it ring twice before answering. Not because I was hesitant, because I wanted him to know I made him wait. Karen, no greeting, no preamble. Just my name, held in the throat of a man who had just watched his empire spring a leak from every sealed corner. His voice was thinner than I remembered, like the oxygen had been pulled from whatever office he was standing in. We need to talk, he said. And then, after a pause, I didn't know. I closed my eyes. There it was, the confession, the white flag. Not in words exactly, but in the silence between them. He wasn't calling to apologize. He was calling to bargain. And there it was again, that old arrogance, dressed in regrets clothes, thinking a phone call could undo what had already detonated. I didn't reply, didn't even breathe into the line. I just reached out and ended the call. No drama. No I told you so, no fanfare. The weight of that silence, that was my signature. I went back to the kitchen, finished rinsing the pot, and opened my laptop one last time. Just habit now, one more glance at the SEC portal before bed. But tonight was different. A new message blinked in bold. Preliminary review complete. Further action pending. Thank you for your submission. I stared at the screen, unblinking. Not because I was surprised, but because it was done. The bridge I built, the fire I lit, the truth I carved into binary, it landed. Brad was missing. Legal was bleeding. Robert had just been reminded who exactly he handed a pink slip to without reading the fine print. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just sat there, letting the cold hum of vindication settle across the room like evening fog. Not warm, not triumphant, but clean. He gave me a reality check. I gave him a real one back, federally time-stamped. Big thanks for watching, you sneaky seniors. Subscribe to keep the coffee pot brewing revenge. Your ex-colleagues won't know what hit him.